الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد الله ونصلي على رسول الكريم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباد الله المصطفى أما بعد. So what I want to approach, and I just titled this The Mystery of Karbala. As just an introduction, I'd like to state that Islam must be approached through a social justice, a human rights and contextual justice lens. We cannot speak authoritatively if we lack nuance or sophistication. And the type of nuance that comes from the Nahjul Balagha or some of the great Imam of Islam. I'm also very highly optimistic about millennials. They have the heart in the right places. And I must also warn that I do not subscribe to a oppression Olympics, that only our pain or the pain of one community is a unique pain and all. We dismiss all other pains. But all the oppressed, all the innocents across the globe become our concern. Because justice is ultimately about the pursuit of innocence, and justice is about speaking truth and living for the truth. Whether it's Africans drinking stagnant water and having a stolen device to turn stagnant water into drinking water, or tribes in the Amazon losing their land through illegal logging and finding old cell phones to fix that problem. Very often the primitives have so much to offer. There's a documentary out on the shaman to show how the shamans could effectively cure mental health issues that even the best professors at Harvard couldn't. Now we live in a time when it's almost difficult to breathe religiously and spiritually without addressing social justice, without addressing the political and economic systems we live in. In fact, it would be very naive to defend the religious and spiritual without knowing how political games are played on the political chessboard and how Islam has become a political football or punching bag. Our responses without political savviness would come across as apologetic, because we would fall into the traps and frames of war economies and disaster capitalists. The misuse, abuse, and inordinate love of power have corrupted many political as well as some religious and spiritual leaders. Religious leaders often lack contextual justice. Now that was not the case with Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu. Yazid bin Muawiyah created a system of injustice, and he departed from the ideals of the Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path that the pious Khalifs followed. Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu realized that to fight systematic, structural and symbolic violence by state actors, it was not enough just to flirt with justice. It was not enough to have electrifying oratory, khutab, extolling the virtues of justice and the just, or extolling the virtues of poor, poverty and the dispossessed. It was not enough to be profoundly spiritual or deeply intellectual, nor was it enough to have personal charisma or barakah, or use one's spiritual nobility to rectify the situation. Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu, his legendary generosity, his effortless philanthropy, his sharp wit, and his pure lifestyle were not enough. Something revolutionary, something drastic, something radical was needed. Migrate from Medina, and not to Medina, at an advanced age of 68, with a team of his pure family, spiritually refined members of the family, innocent children, and the most virtuous and intellectual, pious women of the time. The spiritual, collective spiritual capital, the collective intellectual capital of that team that Imam Hussain took out is phenomenal. Now the thought of it seemed almost crazy, and that's exactly what Imam Hussain and the pure family did. Allah says in the Quran, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ يُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ رِجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرُكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Allah has given them such a purity that no other family has ever had or will ever have. Now, after news reached him of the martyrdom of his cousin Muslim and his Muslim son Aqil, the 10-year-old, Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu and the family still stayed the course. some scholars of teaching social justice are convinced that colonialism has not come to an end. And I wonder sometimes if Sunnis ignore the ignoring of Karbala, and that the mission to address issues of human rights and social justice could still be blamed on the colonial enterprise. So this is a gift from a bitter colonial past, where the victim actually believes that he was a victimizer, and the poor fight for the right of the new feudal lords to exploit them. I used to think that bigots were only ignoramuses, and so the moment you educate people, then the bigotry would disappear. But I'm much more informed now, and then the greatest damage I realize to Islam and many communities comes from evil geniuses who orchestrate and calculate how to leave damage that would last for centuries. So living the values we espouse, the value of justice and that intersection of justice with mercy, that is really the lesson of Karbala, the lesson of Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu. There are only 6 ayat of the Quran that speak specifically of Sawm Ramadan in Surah Baqarah. There are 629 ayat that speaks about adl, qist, and condemns dhulm. 6 compared to 629. There are 1200 ayat that speaks about mercy, love, forgiveness, and just we could put it all on the category of love, merciful love or rahmah. So if you have 1/3 of the Quran speaking about the intersection of justice and mercy, or justice or fairness and love, and yet Muslims are so bogged down with ritual. Fasting is great, and it's justified that people in Iceland want to fast 22 hours, and we are still putting so much emphasis on these rituals. But equally important would be just to get that message of justice out, and the fact that 200 verses of the Quran would be speaking about justice and mercy. So Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu decided that the radical solution and that ultimate sacrifice was needed. If you're not going to do that, then constantly these systemic groups or structural violence would sacrifice the lives, the liberties and labors and even legacies of multiple or millions of other people. But not only the leader needs to be in on it. You look at many stories of heroism, and you find that there's one hero rising, but he still wants to protect his family. He still wants to keep his family safe. He wants to keep his community safe. He goes out into the mountains and fights the system. This was not the case of Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu. He took his entire family, not only staying in the comfortable environment of Medina where they had all that support network, but actually marching for more than 1,000 miles and exposing themselves. So, well, that is something amazing. He took his wife, his wives, his children, siblings, friends, and all those who admired him. Getting out of his comfort zone and what some people might think as a suicidal mission, and yet that is being remembered for eternity. Today we face neo-feudalism, we face neoliberalism, we face disaster capitalism. A good book is to read the book of Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine. We face corrosive capitalism, not compassionate or inclusive capitalism, but corrosive capitalism. There are vast deficits of dignity and vast deficits of democracy in a neo-imperialist age. And the only way for us to overcome this is to look at the lives of these great heroes of the past, and especially there's nothing to beat the story of Karbala, the story of Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu. One of the greatest challenges we face today is the challenge of falsehood that masquerades as truth, where victimizers blame the victims, or they even play the victim. The arsonists have become the firefighters. There are many people are convinced now that ISIS is nothing but Mossad and the CIA. And if you read Oliver Stone, and how the CIA operated as guerrillas in the Vietnam War, then it's quite believable. Now, when the religious cannot be exposed without knowing the mechanics of politics and economics, when religious and spiritual and cultural are being brokered through the political, when fiqh has become all political, and when those who claim to be political, apolitical, are actually complicit through their silence, and their silence has become betrayal. Falsehood appears as truth, like the Dajjal. يحرفون الكلمة عن مواضع. They are just turning, inverting everything. The story of the Masih and the Masih. Now in Arabic, Masih comes on the wazn or the scale of fa'il, and fa'il means the fa'il and maf'ul. So if I speak of Masih, Isa al-Masih, Masaha means to touch. Isa alayhi salam touched with affection, with love and respect, and he again was touched. There were lepers in the time of Isa alayhi salam, and the lepers had to stay 30 cubits away from those who didn't have leprosy. Isa alayhi salam allowed the leper to approach, to break that ban, to touch him. He cured the leper by touching the leper and cured hundreds of lepers. Today many groups, minorities have leper statuses in society. And so by reaching out and touching their lives in a unique way, we become Isa-like. The Arabic word for Masih, Dajjal, for the Antichrist, is just a single dot differentiating Masih from Masih. And Masakha means to conflate, to distort, or to deceive. And so we deceive, we conflate, and there's deception, whenever there's conflation, we are Masih-like and not like the Masih Isa, who touches and improves the lives and the livelihoods of others. So it is, we cannot claim to be apolitical and then also betray our community. Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu did not do this on his own behalf. He did this on behalf of Islam. He did this on behalf of others. It was extremely selfless. One of the names of the Asma'ul Husna, one of the divine names, is Al-Haq, and Allah is the truth. And research in Arabic is called tahqiq, which you come to the bottom of the truth. There's truth digging and truth telling, and also speaking truth to power. Today teaching has become a subversive activity. We also find that the defense of the truth and the standing up for human rights and social justice or truth-telling has become a subversive obedience. The master narrative is so overpowering that the few other alternative narratives and true narratives that come out is immediately branded as conspiracy theory. So when Ta-Nehisi Coates, who won the 215 New York best-selling novel award or book award, when he comes out and speaks about racism in America, he's called a conspiracy theorist. When Tufts professor Michael Glennon speaks about the parallel government, where the CIA and the FBI and the other groups are actually controlling the government, and Trump and Obama and all of them and the courts, the Madisonians are just theater within theater within theater. He's called a conspiracy theorist. So the real conspiracies that every minority, every Muslim is a terrorist, these conspiracies then take the form of the truth, and the truth that comes out are being dubbed as conspiracy theorists. So if you are being called a conspiracy theorist, marhaban and welcome to the club, because there's some truth to that. You're actually digging out the truth, and the system is set up in such a way that any truth exposure suddenly gets seen as conspiracy theory. But those narratives need to be told. The true narratives need to be told. Now, let me see now. One of the other pieces that I found, and I spoke to a friend of mine, Professor Charles Maybe, for several years now, he discussed the whole transfer or evolution from a democrat to the demagogue. And he found that many people that were Democrats initially started off with very noble intentions, noble projects. Sometimes even for a decade or two, they turned demagogue. And then it's very difficult for the populace then to see that switch, because they constantly look at the first few years of the Democrat and not realizing now that that person is really in the domain of the demagogue. The Masih has become the Masih in that sense. And that is where Muslims need to be very careful of. Some Muslim leaders in the Muslim world have actually reached that stage. They've crossed that threshold from democrat to demagogue, and it's very difficult to get the message out about that. Because it's not enough for the Democrat to have had it was just simply enough for them to have had a history of benevolent practices, and subsequent deeds of cruelty, megalomania, greed, corruption, etc. are then all suddenly forgotten, and it's difficult then to fight this very new threat that comes to the community. A diamond only retains its sparkle when you keep on cleaning it. There is constant mud on it, you cannot see the beauty of the diamond shining forth. And the true leader will constantly let the truth shine by itself. But in order to do that, they will have to take off the mud and to clean the diamond at different points in time. Sometimes our mosques, our leaders, our institutes lose that clarity. Today we have Muslim leaders who are collaborating with the government on the CVE program, Countering Violent Extremist program. There are Muslim leaders who are collaborating with Israel on their political tourism projects. So you have all these lack of clarity. They cannot have. Imam Hussain wanted to keep that clarity. Imagine Karbala didn't take place. Imagine Muslims did not have that strong sense of justice or that permission to speak about justice. What would have happened over subsequent centuries? I grew up as a child being exposed to the commemoration of Karbala, even though I was a Sunni. Went into different circles, whether it's Tabligh circle or other circle, and our scholars used to cry when they speak about the tragedy of Karbala. What has happened? Where have we lost that permission to speak openly about that as Sunnis and to commemorate these particular events? Some of our Muslim leaders in the Sunni community in the USA are attacking the Black Lives Matter movement without showing any nuance. And if there's anything we need nuance in this particular thing. Even the Western world is too polarized. You are either part of the alt-right or the alt-left. If you want to be part of the academia, you must embrace homosexual unions. And there's no sophistication. At least in Utah, you have the Utah Compromise, where you don't speak about, you leave homophobia and you differentiate between homophobia and homosexual unions. You're not going to attack the First Amendment law, where every religion has the right to express themselves in their own way. That's what Utah did. They defended the First Amendment, but said, we are not going to discriminate when it comes to housing and to schooling and to entertainment in those places. You leave that aside, but that's a different matter. But don't conflate the two. That you cannot be part of the liberal and progressive movement unless you fully accepted this. And that's a challenge now within academia. We cannot have a voice when it comes to these particular issues. And so I think when it comes to placing all social activists in the terrorist camp, as one of our Muslim leaders did, and put all the Muslim Brotherhood in one camp. Now there are 70 different groups of Muslim Brotherhood. And when the Obama administration invites Anas Takriti from the Cordoba Institute to the White House, the only question Obama asks is, are the oil pipes in Iraq safe? That's the only concern they have. So you use these groups for your advantage, but because these groups are known for their social justice message, you also want to put a label onto them, and our Muslim Sunni leaders are falling into that trap. You also have Muslim Sunni leaders are unable to speak truth to power, who encourage political tourism, as we've said, to a rogue state like Israel, become co-opted through hard and soft surveillance. Many of the grants provided to mosques and to Muslim youth groups and to other groups are actually a form of soft surveillance. Khalid Beydoun wrote a book recently on Islamophobia, so that would be a good book, and he discusses this particular issue. But we don't preserve the integrity of the community if we collaborate with the structural systemic violence that is in place. Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu knew that, he didn't do that, and that's a great lesson and the mystery of Karbala. When I went to London just last week, I discovered that in East London there's a very large Bangladeshi community, and what the government there has done is they placed a LGBTQAI mosque inside that community, and also the gentrification of that community is taking place. So pushing out the poor in order to put very hip gay bars and other places in that particular place. So being masters of nuance, masters of hikmah, of wisdom, and there's an evolution from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. But being masters of wisdom, that is where the great family and the Holy Family really showed us the way. At this conference that I went to in London, it's about social entrepreneurship, and it was really interesting to see how a social entrepreneur thinks, that no matter how difficult things seem, that they never lose the big picture, they never lose that ambition that seems almost crazy. If the ambition is at 100 or 200 years from now, our great-grandchildren or our seventh generation will still have access to organizations that speak the truth or tell the truth, well then that is something that is noble. And that's where the social entrepreneur comes in. They do not care about losing face temporarily in order to preserve something for the future. One of the ways I think that we could move forward is to really bankrupt the bullies. In the 1981, the Southern Poverty Law Center came up with the idea of a law firm that would go after the KKK and defending the Vietnamese. Now for 1981 to win an award in a lawsuit of 6 million was quite something large. Or then subsequently winning many awards of 26 million and bankrupting the bullies. If these bullies are orchestrated, if they are very, very intelligent communities and very wealthy communities, these awards could be hundreds of millions or even billions. So getting law teams into place with good security, because you're going to get lots of death threats, that is really the way to go forward. We're not politically, we're not going to take over the country. That's never in our part of our agenda. But we can use the legal system to fight other forces. We have to use the legal system to create all the mess. Islamophobia is Zionist inspired or Zionist led. And if they can come up with this 5,000, 6,000 page document to say that wearing a hijab is passive terrorism, and look for this and that, they put almost every Muslim group from the ultra-conservative to the ultra-liberal Muslim group is in the camp of terrorists. So you're not going to fight that by just pampering the bullies or sweet-talking them or speaking about love. You have to do something radical. You have to take it up legally, perhaps create the equivalent of the Northern Poverty Law Center, where the emphasis is going to be on fighting Islamophobia. There's the issue of statistics that lie. Sometimes those in power, the military-industrial complex, would deflate or inflate numbers just for their own personal advantage. And so sometimes saying that Muslims are only 2.35 million instead of 12 to 15 million, or that Muslims in China are only 15 million instead of the 100 million that are out there. These are, Muslims need to study themselves and invest in these types of research that is not going to be corrupted or compromised by other people's agenda. The global lynching that is taking place. In 2009, Obama authorized 20,000 rogue drones to be used. The work of Glenn Greenwald about drones is very important. Al Jazeera also covered part of that. But it's important for our community to see that. One single drone can take out 40 elders who just were discussing a business opportunity. And it was very calculated, very deliberate, even after these elders had permission to have that jirga or that particular meeting up there. What's happening to Tariq Ramadan now? It's just pure academic lynching. What's happening across the USA, where many bright and brilliant and some of the best teachers at universities are not getting tenure. So we need to create our own universities. 100 years ago, the Catholics were not fully accommodated, and these Catholics have created 150 universities. Some have reached global prominence, like Notre Dame and Georgetown. But they have their own legal clinics, free legal clinics, and their law schools. They have many other facilities. A university in itself can solve almost every problem of the Muslim community, with psychological legal clinics, psychological clinics and legal clinics, financial clinics, all could be part of that university project. So I would like to see our own 150 full universities within the next 50 years, inshallah. Justice is all, as we've said, also about the pursuit of innocence. The USA had what we call the Blackstone formulation. It is better to release 10 so-called alleged criminals in order to save one innocent person. That has been turned upside down, and if you look at the movie 13 about the prison industry, you will realize that 95% of people in prison do not belong there. The people who put them in prison, the private industries, they are benefiting billions from that process. And so I think those who are politically uninformed or naive or co-opted invariably embrace religious sectarianism. Because if you do not know the global picture, it's easy for you to say Iran is responsible for whatever is happening in the Middle East. The Shias are responsible for whatever is happening in Syria, or whatever the case may be. The master narrative is so powerful. By you buying into national sectarianism, you invariably also embrace other religious sectarianisms. So in order to transcend the Shia-Sunni divide, it would be very unfortunate if our discussions on Karbala only becomes about what the Saudis are doing, or what the Sunnis are saying, and we against them, you know? Because that's exactly what the colonial powers would actually want us to do. So, in order to look at the whole interpretation of patriotism. Now, there's a beautiful saying about patriotism by one of the great activists a few decades ago, and he said that there are 3 patriots, 2 bad ones and 1 good one. The only 2 bad patriots are loveless critics and uncritical lovers. And the only good patriot is the person who has a lover's quarrel with his nation, with his community, with his society, even his family. So there's only one type of patriot. But many are asking us, if you want to be a true American, if you want to be a true patriot, you must buy the false narrative or the master narrative that America is just doing everything for benevolent reasons. There's no global lynching going on, there's no global power plantation overseas. And so that is the real challenge. academics are unfortunately in need of the lessons that we learned from Imam Hussain radiallahu anhu. I spoke to some of my colleagues and they said many academics are just brainiacs, but there's always a vicious and pernicious fight for turf. And because they're getting grants, the soft surveillance grants from the government, they're not speaking the truth. They have their own little agendas. And so the academics are not going to be your answer, especially Middle Eastern studies, very little promotion there, and there's different ways to sabotage these programs or even to pull the rug out of successful programs. Research is ultimately tahqiq, coming to the haqq, and so even repeating ourselves on these issues are going to become very important. Academics have become emasculated and castrated. The humanities everywhere are suffering. Every university are now moving towards turning tenured professors into almost like just at-will employees. They can still be under review. So that's an attack and assault on the academies, where truth could be spoken to power, so they are taking that away so that the war economies can flourish. We also have many adjunct professors have sacrificed 7, 8, 10 years of studies, and they can't even make ends meet. They have to rush from college to college to get a class here and there. They have no benefits. When that's a different form of human trafficking, if you really want to look at it. A type of forced labor, and it's very unfortunate in this country. I think many heroes, as I've said, have emerged and they've just addressed their own issue and fought for that. Imam Hussain did not do that. In order to redress the violence against Islam and the Ummah, he stood up and he took his entire family on that particular trek to Kufa and to Baghdad through the desert. The only way to silence a bully is really to get face to face with him. If a bully comes your way and say, okay, take my satchel, and they're not going to want that. They want more and more from you. You have to stop it at some different way. But we look at the story of the sister of Imam Hussain, Zainab, and her beautiful story of courage. Fortunately in the Muslim Sunni world also, every family has a Zainab, every family has a Fatima, every family has these great names, and we could use that as a starting point and bring us back on track. The forces of Batil do not want us to speak about injustice. A few years ago, I'm part of the interfaith community for the past 20 or 25 years. And I've also realized that often the interfaith movement has been sabotaged. The US government uses interfaith as a soft diplomacy. I went to Perth, I went to Mali, and I found that to be the case. A lot of Reform Jews, not all of them, but some of them are using this just as a cover up to recruit people to go to Israel, especially Christian clergy, and they don't want issues of justice to be spoken of. One stage someone wrote that you use the word justice in one of these briefs, a Muslim, and immediately from the other camp, the Jewish camp, said, just cut out the word justice. We don't want that word justice in there. So the agenda is very clear, and interfaith is an amazing opportunity to reach out to find out how we don't have to reinvent the wheel and to learn from other communities, but it should not be used to silence us, to normalize things and to neutralize us. And many times the interfaith has just become an opportunity for Christians to have 80% of the time and Muslims have 10% of the time and so on. That's not a fair deal for that matter. One case there was a collaboration between a Jewish and a Muslim group in Michigan, and there was a grant of 110,000. Said, okay, we'll give you Muslims 10,000 of the grant, we'll take the 100,000. Now you look at that type of interfaith, that's a farce, and that's something we need to be careful. do interfaith, it's amazing, but just be careful that there are traps, and there's also groups that are sabotaging in that. But in this type of times, we also need to be skilled in philosophy, because many of those who argue against justice use philosophical fallacies. So if you're not skilled about slippery slope thinking and red herring and many of these philosophical fallacies, you are also in troubled water. When virtues and values are inverted, when secularity becomes secularism, I had an entire piece on secularity. Muslims are for secularity, where we defend the rights of minorities, where we defend the rights of other people to be inclusive. But we cannot embrace a secularism that edits out the divine and tries to sell distortion as if it is the truth. We have a new inquisition and using a lot of circular thinking, so we need to be more time. There are two types of rationalism. In my thesis, I looked at Hitler. Hitler also embraced rationalism, but the rationalism of Hitler was bureaucratic. It was calculated. It wasn't. There's a different type of rationalism out there. So even being nuanced about what is the good type of rationalism and the bad type of rationalism. Even in our strategies in solving the problems, if we just have a logic-centered strategy and we don't bring emotion that is filtered through reason, if we don't bring that part of that into our strategies, we're going to be doomed. And that's what many philanthropic groups are doing. They're using just logic-centric strategies instead of looking at emotion. There's a place for tears. There's a place for crying. And I wish more Sunnis would cry when they read the story of Karbala, when they read the story of the pain of the Ahlul Bayt. Every Sunni prays for Ahlul Bayt in every prayer, every at-tahiyyat. Wa ala ali Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We pray for the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So just to have some concluding remarks then, and I want to also end off with a statement out here about inclusivity. That I think for Muslims to move forward, we really need to let many of our Sunnis start to re-embrace the commemoration of Ashura, and having that permission, not only for 10 days of the year, but maybe throughout the year, to speak about issues of justice. Not only justice that concern us, but that concern all humanity, and justice also that concern even the animals and the ecology, eco-spirituality that we could think of. Let us use Karbala then to expose the arsonists who became also the firefighters and expect applause for their firefighting, the neo-fascists, the neo-feudalists, the neo-liberalists, disaster capitalists, the war economies. Use Karbala to exonerate the innocent wherever and wherever they are found. Che Guevara was once asked by a woman who had the same last name, are we family? So he said, if you quiver with rage at any injustice done anywhere to anyone, then we are family. And that's the sense of justice we need to think of, the sense that I think Imam Hussain radiallahu alayhi salam was espousing. Justice is about innocence, and let us pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use us as instruments for His justice. The saying that I wanted to end off with sounds something like this, and let me see if I can. I want to read it off, but those who love only themselves are narcissists, the me, mine, myself syndrome. Those who love only their family are nepotists. Those who favor only their friends are guilty of cronyism. Those who love only the rich and powerful are elitists. Those who benefit and favor only people from their own street, their village, their city, their county or state are provincialists. Sectarian nationalists only help, support and root for their countrymen. Too often these nationalists become paranoid patriots, incapable of having a lover's quarrel with their nation. Those who love only people from their own religion or their own madhab are religious bigots. Muslims embrace a multiplicity and inclusive excellence wherever we transcend the religious divide, ethnic, class, caste, cultural and linguistic divides, we will thrive. And let us pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us what Rumi called when he wrote his Mathnawi. Rumi wrote in the preface to his Mathnawi, Ada usulu usuli usuli deen. I am bringing you to the essence of the essence of the essence of faith. We need to dig down so much deep and become so nuanced that we get the essence of the essence. We just don't only become the spiritual elite, khawas, but become khawasul khawas, the elite of the elite. And that was exactly what the Holy Family was. They were the elite of the elite, and they knew the essence of the essence of the essence of everything. May Allah give us a nuanced understanding of everything, make us pioneer, frontier, visionary, ambiguous scholars, and thinkers who will not suffer the indignity of being understood. When you are easily understood, it means you haven't been thinking and you're not the expert in your field. So we don't want the indignity of being understood. There's a beautiful saying also that dreams are not what you see when you sleep, but dreams are what you lose sleep about. And so that is what we want, those type of dreams that we're going to lose sleep about, to leave a legacy of monumentality, a legacy where people 100 years from now will say these people were selfless, they thought about us. Think about your children, think about their great-grandchildren. And as the Native Americans speak about the 10th or 7th generation, how is what you're doing now going to impact the 7th generation to come? And if there's anything, we are not asking for people to become politicians, but we are simply asking to inject piety and righteousness into everything we do, whether you're a physician, whether you're a business person, whether you're an imam or a politician. Inject piety and righteousness into everything, and everything should be. But also don't forget that the interconnectedness amplifies the power of small acts of defiance in a revolution of values. Tiny ripples of hope, as Robert Kennedy wrote, from millions of actions can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression. The Goliaths could look like locusts when we have faith, family, spirituality, and ethics as haram, as sanctuaries. So may Allah grant us all that. May Allah grant us a vision that Ibrahim alayhi salam had to turn a desert into a Makkah, into a thriving metropolis. But everything comes when we believe in ourselves and we believe that we can make a difference. Allah bless us. May Allah bless the memory of Imam Hussain and the great family. And may Allah make us all martyrs for the truth and help us to live in